Thank you for joining us this afternoon. My name is Ian McCullough. I am on the Turnitin United States and Canada K-12 team. And one of the great privileges of my job is the opportunity to interact with inspirational and outstanding educators. And we're here to have a conversation this afternoon with our Global Innovation Award winner, the Turnitin Global Innovation Award winner for 2019 for secondary education, the wonderful Rachna Nath. And as part of the larger conversation that we have with our community, original thinking is at the heart of what we do. And one of the things that I truly admire about Rachna is her ability as a high school science teacher to really challenge her students to push the boundaries. And what we're going to do over the next hour or so is explore with Rachna exactly how she goes about that. And so with that, Rachna, thank you for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you, and it's always been a pleasure with just talking to you, and it's a great honor and opportunity. So thank you. Thank you to you, and thank you to Turnitin.
Absolutely. So you have very kindly shared some photos with us, and we've prepared them into a bit of a slide deck. And we're going to get to the core part first, but I have a really crucial question as we begin this conversation. What on earth are you doing here? In a moment of authenticity, I do have to disclose, as a matter of bias and some of the things that we at Turnitin talk about, I happen to be terrified of bees. So that when you sent me this picture, I figured we needed to lead off with this. Tell me about what's happening here.
Well, this is my very first day handling bees as a volunteer at the Honeybee Lab at ASU. I always wanted to get into a PhD program here after 13 years of my first master's in 2001. And I decided, okay, we need to start people to actually know me to get me into their labs. So I started volunteering. And first day of my volunteering, my biggest mistake was not to cuff my wrists with tape because, yes, of course, 3 bees got in and stung me. But that moment was it's a revealing moment for me because I fell in love with them. Even though they stung me, I fell in love with them. And for the next 4 or 5 years, and even now, I go back to the bee lab and work with bees whenever I can. So this particularly is a 1 frame of bees. So a hive usually has 9 frames, and we culture them that way so that we can actually extract the honey from the combs. And fascinating thing. I mean, I was stung many times after that. Even after being completely suited and booted, the worst time that I had been ever stung was around 51 times all over my body, even after I was completely suited the way I am right now. So, but I still went back.
Excellent. Well, the other thing that I love about this photo is that I think it is reflective of your philosophy of teaching, which is to get hands-on. And so, and also that stings are part of the process. In our preparation for this, something that we've identified, and coming back to your Global Innovation Awards work, our profile for that, and various things that we've had the opportunity to do with you in our acquaintance. I still remember one of our earliest conversations where you were talking about the student projects and the hands-on learning and challenging students to go forth. And I recall the moment that we had in one of our first conversations, like, okay, so you are a big believer in project-based learning. And you were like, no. Let me be very clear in what I support. And it is from there that you started introducing your concept of Dribble. And so as we move into this first phase of conversation, this concept of Dream Research Innovate project-based learning is the vocabulary that you have adopted for your approach to working with students. As a distinction here, let's talk for our audience about what you see as conventional project-based learning and how you take it farther.
Absolutely. Now, if you look at the concept of project-based learning, I mean, all of the science curriculum, all of the robotics curriculum, they're based on project-based learning. So they start up with a project. They and the project is done and they learn something, right? So my idea was to take that same structure and expand it into something more than just a project. So my projects include dreaming about an idea, idealizing it. Then you take that idea, you research on that idea, you do a path search, you do background searches, and then the concept of innovate comes in because now with research, you know what is already existing out there and what's not. So they end up innovating. So it's still a project-based learning, but with a wide range of things which they students bring in by themselves. It is their idea, their dream, their research, their innovation, at the end of which we end up actually patenting our ideas and the students end up establishing LLCs. So again, from a simple project, you end up with an LLC where the students are actually very, very motivated because it's their dream, it's their ideas, it's their, passion that they bring on. So, I just have to start them off like, okay, let's start dreaming about this. And the dream actually comes from the resources that I provide with them. I said, hey, there's a $10,000 grant from MIT. There's a $10,000 grant from Lexus Eco Challenge. Let's just see what we can do with the $10,000. So for most part, after a certain period of time, it doesn't matter about the grant anymore because they're so passionate about their idea that even if they do not end up getting the grant, they still end up patenting their ideas and establishing companies. Well, so that's what Dripple is all about.
And I think that that's a wonderful transition for us to talk about some of those projects. One of the other things that we established early on, and you were adamant about, that to know you and your work as an educator, in order to do that, you must know your students. And so let's talk about some of these projects and how original thinking, the process by which original thinking got fostered and surfaced in them. So this first one here, we have Y-Band.
So this is actually the beginning of all my entire process of, Dribble. This was in 2018, and the Y-Band is a device that works on mesh network, and it amplifies very weak signals in almost literally dead zones. So think about going from Arizona to Nevada, and of course, as you're traveling, I'm from Arizona, so I've been into Vegas like 33 times in my 14 years of my marriage. So I'll have to say that. So as you're traveling from Arizona, Phoenix to Vegas, there are certain areas when you're driving by a car, there are areas where there is no Wi-Fi. This Y-band is supposed to amplify a previously existing small Wi-Fi to something that you can actually use in kind of emergencies. You can use it in terms of, if you want to see your email, you're calling somebody, you can do anything you want. So it started off with 3 students. We ended up again as a part of a Lemelson MIT grant. It was a $10,000 grant for an innovative idea for a real world problem. And the problem, of course, was dead Wi-Fi zones. So in here in this picture, you'll see from 3 students, we ended up having 10 students. Very inclusive, equitable environment where they're presenting actually in front of the Chamber of Commerce and the Chandler Mayor about their ideas to bring in more collaborations for their ideas.
Now, did this idea in particular, was this you having a conversation with your students and be like, Ms. Nath needs to be able to get from Chandler to Vegas without a Wi-Fi interruption. Students can figure this out, or was this something they surfaced to you? Where was the seed of this idea?
Well, actually, the seed of the idea came from those first 3 students who actually applied for the initial grant, and they were just brainstorming as to what could be an initial great idea to even apply to MIT. So just a word for MIT, for high school teachers. High school students as young as 9th graders was like, wow, we're going to write for an MIT grant? So it gradually started with that. The seed was there, those 3 students. And then it caught fire where more students joined in. And we did end up getting into the final round, and I got to go to MIT for training for 5 days. And it's just a fascinating way to get those kids recognized, because after that, guess what happened? there were batches and batches and batches of students who wanted to do the same thing. So role model, the playing of role models, and I follow the idea of, I know I can be as much of a teacher as I am, but if the students are not motivated by themselves, you cannot do anything. At one point where you're teaching high school, if the students are not motivated, they are not going to do it. That's it, because they have too much of homework, they have too much of volunteer activities, too much of extracurricular activities. But with these kids getting to where they were, they became the role models for other students. And I had batches and batches and batches of students come up to me after they were done saying, hey, I want to be a part of the project. I want to be part of next year's project. And there were times when, there were years when I actually had to take like a sort of a screening test to see who was actually motivated enough to, because everybody will come with the name of MIT, but who are the ones who are truly invested in the idea? Because I told them, if you're in this, you're not going to be able to play any games, because we meet at least 4 days a week after school.
Well, there we go. Speaking of those batches and batches, let's flip to the next slide, and we can tie that story together.
Sure. Oh, this is a fascinating story. These all students, they were ninth graders now. Well, they're ninth graders then, they're 10th graders now. And what they are making actually is a volatile organic compound, which is VOC, free scent bag. These scent bags, they are making out of organic materials. And we had already applied for a provisional patent. Now we have a patent pending on this. And what these students have created is because, and if you see that the boy who's sitting down in the lower left-hand corner with the glasses, he was the brainchild for this particular project. And his family has allergy problems and asthma issues. So he said, let's create a scent that does not create these problems. And then guess what? Porsche might be possibly interested in taking this to the next level.
Oh, nice. All right. And so again, stemming from a real world problem that other people had not solved, this was them dreaming and research and innovating.
Exactly.
All right. Now this is a big picture. I'm assuming that these are your students in the front row. I mean,
yes. This is my second batch of MIT students after the Y band. So the Sense Hydro. So the Sense Hydro group actually is, again, a wearable device that actually detects heat stress. So and again, we are Arizonans, and we see a lot of people working outside in the Arizona heat. So these students were motivated by the fact that when kids are outside, when workers are outside, they are working in the heat, what is there to monitor their stress level or even prevent them from, fainting with heat stroke? So they came up with the idea that we need to be able to have a wearable device. Either it can be a wristband, anklet, locket or a ring or even a hat, so that when they are wearing the device, there will be an app on the phone that lets them know about the changes in their body temperatures and their acceleration, and along with their pulse rate. So that they constantly monitor them and say, suppose your body temperature is at a 98, which is your core temperature. If it rises to a 99, there's a notification in your phone saying that, hey, your body temperature just reached 1 degree. You need to get out of the sun and wait. So they were being highly appreciated. We actually got over $60,000 grant for this particular project through the Maricopa County. And we are at a stage of actually manufacturing them at a commercial level. And we have already applied for a patent pending for this too, so that we have a patent pending on this. So all of the people that you see in behind are the Chandler Chamber of Commerce people, where they presented. And we have collaborations within the chamber itself that's helping the students get the prototype out as soon as possible.
This is very exciting. Now, something that is a consistent piece across the ones that we've talked about so far, and we will put a pin in and come back to, is securing the grants in order to take this from a classroom science project to something with real world impact. I do want to sort of put a note there that we are going to talk a little bit about the process and effort that goes into that and how your support as an educator plays there.
Actually, I need to add something to this.
By all means.
Even though we applied for an MIT grant, we did not end up getting that grant. And I remember going to my principal's office when I got an email that we were not the final 15 schools that got the award. I was wailing like crazy. I could not I could not face my students because I had made them, and all of this that you see, they actually did it even before we came to know whether we got the grant or not. After doing all of this, and this is just one crowd of people that they've presented in front of, I made them present at least 5 or 6 more groups of people, and they were constantly, getting out there and talking about their ideas. But when they did not get the grant, it just crushed me to the core. And like I said, I was wailing in front of the principal, and the principal said, Ashna, it feels really nice to see that you care about your students. I'm like, what do you mean? So, but it so happened that they had gotten so much of publicity that the Maricopa County Health Office called me and said, there is a webinar coming up last 2019 November. Would you guys mind to attend? And we attended. And that's when we came to know about this other grant that we can apply for. We applied and we actually ended up getting $50,000, one grant. And when we also received the Intel 4440 grant because of these. So, I mean, it was a pretty...
Some very practical life lessons on persistence there for that.
Exactly. And we had hit, I told them, hey guys, we have hit rock bottom. There is no shame in going anywhere else here because we're just going to go up because there's nowhere to go after that. But they're still with me. They're still working. This is their second year work. And they have applied federal grants through because now they have an LLC of their own, and that's called Sense Hydro LLC. And they are working on like elevator pitches, pitch competitions. They're looking at applying for federal grants through SBIRs, which are your small business innovative grants for small businesses. And I have to admit, I mean, the grant, when I saw the grant instruction, it's 109 pages, Ian. And these kids divided and conquered that grant. Yes, we did not get the grant, that's fine. But the experience itself was tremendous.
Indeed. All right, we're gonna move through a couple more of these, and then we've got some other sections of the conversation. Styrofoam recycling.
Oh my God!
At least in terms of my experience, styrofoam is not a recyclable plastic, and that's a huge practical problem.
Well, I have to tell you, even before I talk about this grant from Arizona Recycling Coalition, these 3 students actually came out 4th in the entire world in the Science and Engineering Fair this year, the International Science and Engineering Fair. So I am just tremendously proud of them. This was the picture taken when we had gone to the AZRC to receive the grant. And there was a huge WasteCon conference and seminar there, and we got to visit all of the booths, and the students learned a lot. Now all of those 3 students are juniors, and they have...
Juniors in high school.
Yeah, these are high school students. And I have 9 aquariums set up in the back of my classroom. Each 9 aquariums have over 500 mealworms, and they're just eating styrofoam. So
that is excellent.
It's amazing. It's amazing.
And speaking of waste and environmental impact,
these group of students were my seniors that year. They were looking at electronic waste collection. Talk about sustainability, Ian. We have it all in our school. So they figured out a way to collect electronic wastes, just like we have the recycling and the trash containers. They are still working with the city of Chandler to have electronic waste containers at certain locations around the city, so that they'll be responsible for collecting it. And they already have a contract with another electronic waste company here. So when the electronic waste containers are full, it will notify the recycling company, and they'll come and get those containers. So they actually are making those small devices where they will put it in these electronic waste containers around the city.
I think that is a practical application that these students are facing. We are in a world much more of the recycling centers that are institutionally organized to collect large televisions and be a place, a single destination, whereas smartphones and smartwatches and just other, truly personal sized electronics have changed this. And this seems like a really an overdue update to how those challenges are approached. I look forward to seeing where that goes.
And this gentleman here, if you can go back quickly, the gentleman in the center, he was a vice mayor in Chandler, so Mr. Rene Lopez, and the students had presented in front of them. So one thing that you'll also see common is that the students not only just apply for a grant and get a grant, but I also make sure that all the students are actually doing the public speaking portion of it too. I will have them go out and talk to the community members about the usability of the product if they are, because if the public doesn't want it, there's no use in making a product, right? So they have to take that into account too. And each of the groups have also presented like that. So
and speaking of presentations,
well, this was a very interesting and it's still ongoing. The lady in the center, the front, the top row, she is an NSF director, and we actually and the gentleman right below her is Dr. Abhishek Shingaroy. I'm working on projects with him and he's an ASU professor. And I met with him 2 years back at a community event. And he was sitting right next to me on the table. I did not know him. He did not know me.
And he was just pause for a second to clarify, we have global viewers as well. National Science Foundation for the United States is NSF. ASU is Arizona State University.
Right, sorry. Yes.
No problem. Continue, please.
You're fine. So with Abhishek, so we were sitting at the table. We did not know each other. And he said, and he was just talking about some projects, and he said, I'm looking for a K-12 teacher whom I'm looking to work for. And I turned around him and I said, hi, I don't know you. I'm a K-12 educator. I'm sitting right next to you. Let's talk. So the talk actually ended up getting us a Flynn Foundation grant. The Flynn Foundation is a huge foundation here in Arizona that actually gives full ride scholarships to to students going to ASU. So we ended up with a Flynn Foundation grant, and then NSF grant. Because of the NSF grant, they are presenting in front of the NSF director. And then now, actually, we have taken that to the next level. We are actually applying for a Department of Defense grant for millions of dollars, so that we can actually use the same platform and take our school's idea into 10 high schools and 10 other middle schools. So it's expanding.
The seed is growing. All right. Speaking of growing, from a project here, where bringing innovation to something that could be done in people's homes.
Well, these are cardboard boxes where our school gets these printer papers, and they were just being thrown away. So my students on the left-hand side, they're making this octopus arm. So we actually have a huge octopus in my classroom with all of these arms radiating out, and they're making these arms, and the arms actually are planters where we can actually grow seasonal plants. The kids had so much fun with this project. It's just because they got to actually build those, cut them into separate orders, and since on the right hand side you see these students holding those, so I have 7 more of those, so it's like 8 arms octopuses. And the first thing they said, it's not, how are we going to water them? I said, okay, now that's brainstorm. How are you going to water them? They are made of cardboard. Yes, you cannot soak the cardboard, but the planters still need water because there's flowers growing. So they figured out a way. So it's amazing what these kids can come up with, given that opportunity that they are just brainstorming together. And that is where I drive all the energy from.
Quickly, we have a variety of project gallery pieces here. Any highlights? Obviously they are all highlights.
Well, the picture in the middle with that whiteboard, they are actually, so this was the same team with the electronic waste thing, and they're actually writing to the EPA protection agencies about letting them know about their. So they were just drafting that email in a whiteboard, and they mailed out an email, mailed out a letter to them. Well, it was so funny because when the students are so used to typing everything out, when they were actually writing the letter on the envelope, after 5 or 6 days, I saw that the letter came back to me. I said, "What's wrong? This should have gotten to EP and not to me." But the students actually had swapped the places of from and to. And I had a huge discussion with them. I said, "Don't you guys ever know how to write on an envelope as to where the to go and where does the from go?" And they said, "Mrs. Nath, we did not know." I mean, and that was a huge, eye opener, because you as a high school teacher think that these students will know some few things. Like we had learned letters, we have email letters, and we have written letters for a long time, but now everything is typed. So then they got a huge, reality check, and they're like, okay. But
well, again, hands-on lessons on that one, even on some of the basics, where I mean, passing generations where certain things that we some of us may take for granted are just not part of the vocabulary. But there is other pieces here in terms of the entrepreneurship that is becoming increasingly natural. And again, tying into the natural question. And one of the things I love about gardening projects is that this is one of those things where, and first of all, I want to challenge every educator who is joining us to assume that your students are capable of some of these accomplishments that Rachna is talking about. But I think that everybody would agree that if you are looking to move into straightforward project, gardening is a good place to start. And I'd love to hear about your approach here. This is something that is very accessible.
Well, I mean, this plot of land that I actually had to ask several times permission from principal and district to just take out a couple of like weird plants that was dying and withering away, but still I needed a permission. I said, "Hey, I'm going to start my new AP environmental class. I need some plot of land to just have the kids get real life experience and actual environmental." I mean, so what the students did was they dug up the whole plot of land. They arranged all of the drip lines, which the boy just writing just next to the totem pole with a black mask. He is an excellent student. I mean, one of my favorite students. He thought that he had this down. I'm like, I'm going to get this done really quick. So he took out from one drip, he just branched and branched and branched and branched, 5 or 6 of them. And I just sat there waiting. I said, "Okay, let's just turn on the water and see what happens to you, Connor." And well, as expected, there was absolutely very minimal pressure on each of them. They're like, and practicability, right? Like you have to be practical, and unless these kids go and get their hands dirty, they're not going to learn it. This guy here, who's bent down with a scissor, he did not know how to plant a plant. And later on, 3 to 4 months later, I see him taking his shoes off, getting cow dung from his nearby cow farm, and spraying that whole thing with cow feces and cow urine, because that's what I said grows really well. And that actually, all the harvest that you see, these are just like 2% of what we harvested. The peas and the greens was because of all of the students' work on it. And every single day, even though we had class with him or not, all the students were like, "Mrs. Nath, did somebody water the garden?" Because we did have pipes, but there were certain areas where the drips were not strong enough because they had wired it. They were so, I don't know what they were at it, seriously. And now, if you see the garden now, we have harvested all of these. We are now growing tomatoes, watermelons, cantaloupes, cilantro, parsley, bell pepper, jalapeno paper, and the whole lot is just overflowing with flowers, which I know are going to fruit in a couple of weeks. And it just gives me such innate pleasure in them. I mean, that was not part of their grades. And that is the most important part. This was not part of their curriculum. They could just have said, I'm not going to do it because it's not going to affect my grade. But every single one of them came out and worked in their dirt every single day.
Well, that's great. And, you know, tapping into that motivation, I think one of the things that we're going to transition to in just a moment is I do, in terms of helping people understand where you're coming from, I do want to talk a little bit about your journey into teaching, which I think is very special. But there is one of your students who I've had the pleasure of meeting, who I simply can't let off the hook, and I do need to, as a moderator, do my duty and make sure to you know, to bring up this young lady who is wait a minute, that last name looks familiar. And some of the project-based learning that your daughter Dia has taken on. And just share a little bit about that, because certainly amongst the many students you have, she is one of them.
Well, so I'll tell you a story. I mean, 1.5 years back, when my husband asked Dia what she wanted to be, she said, "Dad, I want to be a cook." And you know, dads from Indian origin who are all doctors and engineers, he's like, "What?" He was devastated. You know, he said, "No, you cannot do. You need to go to Harvard. You need to go to do. You blah blah blah. You're going to do this." But anyway, I just told him, "Yeah, can you please just calm down? Just let her breathe for a second." And from that moment, what I had seen in her is that through her cooking, you know, she has been able to publish this book. And this book is not just a compilation of 21 recipes, but she mentions about the 2 science projects that she does. And that's where the triple comes in, you know. You need to, the dreaming about even publishing a book is not innate in all high school students. That's to becoming an international bestseller in 4 different countries in 9 different categories. That's something that is unheard of. At least I have not heard of it. So when she brought in her research about gut bacteria and how the gut bacteria influences your neurodegenerative diseases, and what does food have to play, what role does food play in that, that is something that made the book a whole. You know, I mean, and of course she tells her story that she had always struggled with weight loss before, and she was able to, using the diet that she mentions in this book, able to bring her BMI down to a very manageable level. And you know, of course, now she also has a company called Oxyblast. Back in India, we just launched it in January, but COVID happened, so we're just waiting for a little bit. But that is additive for flavonoids, which is very rich in oxygen carrying capacity. It's very rich in, you know, antioxidants. It's very rich in, like I said, flavonoids, and they're very, very beneficial for you guys. So this is her contribution. This is completely her. Yes, I did put that connection together for her. Like, okay, now you can use your research and you can use your book. And that's what my role is, Ian, as a mentor. You know, you create your ideas and then I just connect them and then you take it on your own. So.
Well, I would like to talk a little bit more about that, and I'm very obviously you and I do keep in contact, so I will be following Dia's progress on that one, as well as all of your students. But I do want to take a few moments of our conversation, as much as you are going to pivot to your students, because you always do that, but to talk about you personally and your journey, because as you look at the beginning of your career, you did not set out to become a high school teacher. This was not something that you sought or aspired to. You've been teaching science for how many years now?
Well, over 20 years.
Okay. And in the high school context?
No, high school context is just last 4 years.
Just the last 4 years. How did you get from where you started to where you are? And what does that journey look like for you? Please share, I insist.
Well, it's a long story, but I'll try to keep it concise as much as I can. So, and born in an Indian family, you know, when you are the eldest of three daughters, as of three siblings of the eldest son, where, you know, a lot of them are engineers and doctors, it's a pressure cooker situation. Your parents want you to be either a doctor or an engineer because those were your two acknowledged professions at that point. I say this because it's true. Because when I started my journey as a high school student, I always wanted to be a doctor. But something happened during my 12th grade, after my 12th grade, that I decided, hey, I don't want to be a doctor. I'm just going to get into a general profession. And I was determined to make that work. Because I'm such a radical all the time, I challenged the norms. I told my dad that, you know, Dad, I'm just not going to do medicine. I'm sorry. I actually went into the medical exam because my parents forced me, and I literally marked wrong answers so that I will not get into the medical line. I was that bad. I mean, I was a revolutionary at the point. I'm like, when I think back, I'm like, maybe I should have thought about my parents and listened to my parents, but no, I didn't. So once I bumped a medical exam, right, on purpose, I told my dad, Dad, please mark my words that I will make you proud just going to the general line. So all my cousins at that point who were senior to me, they were all in the engineering and medical professions already. I was the only one who said, I'm not going to do medicine or engineering. I'm going to go to general line. And that was a huge blow to my parents. It was an absolutely huge blow. And they couldn't take, my father was devastated. So he stopped talking to me for a few moments. When I say moments, I'm just going to keep it as moments because when I think about that, it still hurts me. But something happened. I did really well in my master's, and I actually got second place. So it's first class second, which means you're second in a university. And of course, my name came out in the newspapers, and my dad was really happy. Like, oh, okay, she did what she said. So, but when I came here in the US in 2003 after I got married, I was actually struggling to find a job because everybody who comes to US, 80% of them already has a job or has come to study in the US. I was on an H4 visa, just merely got the work permit, and nobody knew me. So I had to do something for myself. And while struggling to figure out what to do, I actually had to change my master's to a bachelor's and still apply for positions which I still didn't get called for. So I said, no, that's enough. I have to put myself out there. So when I said I put myself out, I volunteered. I went out and said, hey, I'm going to just volunteer. Just know me. And one day I realized this was, I think, early March in 2004. This lady comes up to me and says, do you want a job? And this was while I was volunteering at St. Luke's Medical Hospital in Central Tempe. And I looked up at her and I said, I know you because I smile at you every single day when you come and go, as I was in a console or somewhere in the hospital, but I did not know that you actually worked here. And she said, no, I'm the director of diet and nutrition. And do you want a job as a cashier at the cafeteria? And I said, yeah. So that was my first job. So while I was cashiering during the cafeteria open hours, I was cleaning tables and floors when the cafeteria was closed. But I enjoyed so much because guess what I got to learn from there? The diets of different people, these different patients, because I saw that, oh, this patient just had a hysterectomy. What kind of diets would you do? This person just a mastectomy. This person just blah, and blah, 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 blah. And you find information everywhere. And I was enjoying it so much. But again, in August of 2020, I think 4 months after that, I got a faculty position, an adjunct faculty position in one of the community colleges here. And I moved, and then since then, I started teaching at a community college. But 2003 was when my son, my youngest son, I have the daughter and so my son started going to school, which means that I was just sitting there at home because my adjunct I was working only 2 days a week and I had more time for myself. So at that point, I decided I need to get myself out there again. So I was still working at 2 days at the community college, but again, I took a whole bunch of resumes and I went up to Arizona, so United States Department of Agriculture, USDA. We have an office here in Maricopa, and I just said I went in and I just told the front clerk that can I please talk to the director, and she asked me like, do you have an appointment? I said, I'm sorry, I don't, but can I please talk to the director? Like even 2 minutes, that's all I need. So they looked at me really weird because the directors don't have time for just random visitors. But for some reason, the director said yes to, talking to me. And then I go and I introduced myself and I gave him a resume and I said, Dr. Naranjo, Steve Naranjo was the director there. I said, I have a master's in entomology. And I told my history, and I've come here, and I'm now looking for a volunteer job so that you can know me. And if you are happy with the way I work, we'll see what happens later on. So he thought for a second, he looked at my resume, and he said, I'm so sorry. I don't have a volunteer job for you, but I have a job for you. I said, wait, what? So well, I became the lab tech for his lab because he had just been promoted to a director and he needed somebody to work with all of the experiment that was going on in his lab. So I worked for 8 months over there. I meet my mentor, Dr. Colin Brent, who is an extremely dear friend. I cannot, if I say publicly that I really adore him, I respect him, I love him, I'm not lying because that's how special the person is to me because he had taken me from USDA. He introduced me to the honeybee lab at ASU, where again I started volunteering. Again, taking a whole bunch of resumes and going to professors, and he was with me that day. He actually became a part of my committee member when I got into a PhD program later on. Unfortunately, I could not finish my PhD because my professor left for Germany, and there were some other personal things that happened. And that was the time when, after I came to get into a PhD program for 13 years of my first master's, and 2 years down the line, I saw that I'm not going to get my PhD. It just crushed me. I went into depression. I remember the day that I swapped my PhD degree to a master's. I took a year break, and finally I graduated with my second master's from ASU, Arizona State University, in 2018. But during that time, when I changed my PhD to a master's, to a complete master's, I actually joined. I was talking to my friend, and my friend said, "Hey, Rachna, there's a job available. There's a teacher position available. Would you want to come and join?" And I'm like, "A school teacher? I don't know. I've never thought about that, But again, I joined, and Ian, that's destiny. 6 months into the teaching, I got the Y-band thing that you saw, and since then, it's just, when I think about it, I'll tell you, to be very honest, I have found my passion. I have found my happiness. I have found the reason why God has sent me to this world. And that is to be the bridge between what can be and what is for the students that I teach. I'm so sorry. I just got emotional.
I'm getting emotional too. As you've brought your life narrative back to where we started on Dribbble, one of the things I do want to set a few minutes aside for, and then I want to come through and talk about how you facilitate peer interactions, because that has been a constant part of your story with us that I want to make sure that we spend some time focusing on. But I also want to talk about the process and the effort that you put into. One of the key things that comes through is, obviously, you have the piece where students need to do work in the real world, and they're doing things like presenting to government officials, to chambers of commerce, and to getting community input for the validity of their ideas. part of what is also happening is that there are grant applications going on. What is your practice around grant applications that other teachers watching with us might be able to learn from and apply? What do you think the secrets are to writing a great successful grant and making this work?
Ian, to be very honest, it's a learning process. You know, you never know what's going to hit and what's not going to hit. I am blown away by just telling you this. I have an 85% success rate with my grants that I write. And when I say 85%, I write at least 5-6 grants a year. And when I say I write, it's the students who write, and I constantly keep on, you know, sending it back to them. Like, okay, nope, change this, change this, change this, change this. But the biggest secret that I have, the biggest secret weapon that I have, are my near and dear friends who are actually highly motivated to also work with high school students. They are people in the industry. One name that I would definitely want to talk about is Dr. Raj Rajagopalan. He is the president, he's a director of Residio right now. He was a Honeywell director of cybersecurity. He has always been with me since my 2018 project. And he and me, we mentor the kids together so that they know what they are writing about. What are the tricks? And when I say tricks, there has to be a certain amount of, you know, content related things, certain amount of research, certain amount of background information that you have to put. So we put all of those together, you know. And just talking about Raj Rajagopalan, that's not the only thing, because I have been able to build up a community of people around me who are lawyers, patent lawyers, engineers, doctors, industrialists, people in aerospace industry, people in, I don't know, it's just crazy what we have been able to do. And the most thing that I'm really grateful for is that all of these people come to your help when you ask for it. You have to ask for help. You are not, when I say, and I'm a biologist, I'm a scientist, I'm a developmental geneticist, I am not a rocket scientist. But my students are also working on space projects. How is that possible? Because I, as a teacher, have asked for help from the industry experts. And that's where I formed the bridge. I formed that connection for my students. And you may call it a facilitator. Yes, I consider myself as a facilitator, where I facilitate those gaps and build those bridges where the students can actually work with whatever they dream about. And that's the reason why I'm a NASA Solar System Ambassador. That's the reason why I'm a National Geographic Certified Educator. That's the reason why I'm an innovator, because I just love seeing these students take the extra step that is beyond their academics. And you just have to see my classroom. And I am not joking, Ian. Especially when there was no COVID, the students would not leave my classroom. I'd literally have to kick them out. I said, I'm sorry, I have to go home. And my husband says, you're a high school teacher. Why are you staying there? When your school gets over at 2:30, why are you coming home at 5 o'clock? I said, I don't know. I just cannot let them go. I always keep on talking and brainstorming and things, you know. Over these 4 years that I have been there, I have cried every single year at their graduations, because there is these amazing kids. And now guess what? These kids are resources in the universities that they are going.
Well, if I'm doing my math correctly, if you've been teaching high school for about 4 years, I believe this is the first kind of full cohort that you are commencing into the larger world.
Yes, yes. And the very first year that I taught, I have this student, she went to Vanderbilt, and now she is coming back. So she just got into Johns Hopkins University Medical School, and she's asking, Mrs. Matt, can I come and pick your brain about what kind of things I can do in med school? I'm like, I have no idea what you're going to do in med school. She's like, no, you will definitely come up with ideas. Let's talk. I'm like, okay, let's talk. So, you know, students, and that is one of my biggest gift that I have.
Well, that's wonderful. Now, bringing this conversation full circle, we do have a few minutes left. And one of the things that you've hit on, certainly applying for grants, and I think you just hit on a key point in terms of success there, is building up a community where you simply do the thing that is sometimes harder to, feels more uncomfortable than it is, and asking these people for help and finding out who will do that. Something that constantly comes up in conversation that you seem very strong at facilitating is building community and bonds amongst your students, where it was one of the first things you said in this hour together, the challenge that they provide to one another. I would like to hear, for the benefit of our audience, let's talk a little bit about the peer process and how you create a context whereby the students will provide feedback to one another, challenge one another to exceed, and this becomes a place where they can almost learn from one another even more than they learn from you.
And every single time, Ian, whenever I come to this topic, it's a huge conflict with what is out there versus what I believe. What's out there is, okay, let's just facilitate minor communities, minority communities, minority communities, minority communities. And that's all where the grants go to, okay? I'm not against that at all. But what I'm saying is that unless they see one person who is from the minority community, who has achieved these things that they have, that individual will, no matter what I do, it's not going to influence anybody. But if there is a role model from that particular community that has gotten these grants, that have been able to use these grants and go to the next level, they become their best examples. Am I being clear? Do you understand what I said?
Indeed.
That in the Hispanic community, okay, just giving grants to the Hispanic community will not do it. But if you have a Hispanic person who has a grant and is going back to give back to their own community, then they see this, oh my God, that person is from our own community and they're doing so well, why can't I? And that's where the peer-to-peer interaction, peer-to-peer pressure comes in, where you are building relationships between the students. I am just the back end, because what I have seen with most of the teachers is that they facilitate the entire workshop or class, whatever they're doing, right? And the students do not get to speak up to what they want to do. It's surprising because we just started a new club called SEDS. So SEDS stands for Students for Exploration and Development of Space. And one of the students said, Isnan, what do we do now? I said, why are you asking me? I'm sorry, I'm just going to be back in the back end. You guys are going to discuss what you guys want to do, and I will see what I can do to facilitate that. I am not going to give you guys ideas to how to run your club. I'm sorry. So they're like, wait, but everybody else does it. I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm a very different teacher, unfortunately. But they have come up with amazing. And given that you have to give the students that platform to think.
Well, the platform and giving the students the role model to build off of, I think these are the key, the key things and the resources.
Yeah, and that actually changes. And I have had students who were literally a C or a D student. But once they got into those projects, and I said to my entire class, hey, you know what? Look what David built. He built this robotic arm to help a 4-year-old student to hold her iPad up because she is on wheelchair all the time. When you give that recognition to the students are motivated to do well in your class too. So the academics follows. So, you create that world for them where they love what they're doing. They see that they have been recognized for, and then the motivation to do well in your class automatically comes up.
I think that is a fantastic place for us to draw to a conclusion. And the way I like to close these conversations, as we hit various points throughout, I always like to leave our audience with something actionable. So, you can take a moment on this one. And if you think about all of your practice as a dreamer, a researcher, an innovator, and an educator, a high school educator watching this session, what is one thing that they could change about their practice tomorrow that will help their students perform better?
Oh my God. I mean, see, I did not come into this profession to change the way the students were thinking, right? I came to this profession because I was distraught about what happened in my life. I did not see what I wanted to see until that email in my spam folder talking about that Levinson MIT grant. I think each of the teachers have to find a passion for themselves. You know, they have to have that motivation to advance their students, not just academically, but to make them better persons. To be very honest, in my 90 minutes of class or whatever minutes of class that I have with those kids, I will always spend at least 10 minutes of that 90 minutes not on curriculum, but just talking to them about what they are feeling. How and where do you think they are doing? Because I have come to build a relationship with these kids, even though the kids are not in my grant. And when I say kids, I mean my students, right? They might not be in my grants, but there are students who come up to me and say, Mrs. Nath, can I please not do this assignment? I have a very broken household. It just breaks my heart. And I have to take care of my younger kid. And they are true. And I can see from their eyes that they are not lying. You know, and when they share those stories with me, I truly feel blessed because I think I'm more than an educator at that point. I'm somebody that they feel comfortable with. You know, that moment where it comes to, I'm not just Mrs. Nat who teaches honors bio. I'm Mrs. Nat that they can trust with their stories, with their secrets, with their, successes, failures. And that is such an honor. So to all my fellow teachers, this is what I have to say. You have to build a relationship with your students, and teaching happens automatically.
I think that is a beautiful closing note. Thank you so much for spending the time with us this evening. To our audience, thank you for joining us. Keep an eye on turnitin.com/events for more upcoming webinars. Rachna, maybe we have you back sometime to have another conversation. We'd love to have you back and explore even more deeply. Thank you all very much, and have a great day.
Thank you. Thank you so much.